Hey there, everybody. I'm Mike DiLisio.
I'm Wendy Yi.
Ahoy, I'm Scallywag Chris.
Wow.
You didn't go with Ahoy.
I did not. And Chris is known for many things. One of them is being one of your favorite greetings, Chris, is ahoy.
Mm-hmm. Ahoy and ahoy hoy, I accept.
I feel like you say ahoy hoy more than
Yes.
just ahoy.
That was Alexander Graham Bell's preferred way of answering the telephone. And now you know something you didn't before. Sorry about that.
I have no one to blame but myself for this. Ahoy is the newest game from Leader Games. They are known for a number of different things. Asymmetric play, 4-letter titles. Will this be a game that takes you on a fantastic journey, or will you sink before you leave the harbor? Let me show you how the game plays briefly, then we'll come back here and let you know what we think. Okay, here we see many of the components for Ahoy, and the first thing I want to point out is that I am not doing an exhaustive rules teach here. This is very much a general overview of the game, just to give you some kind of context for some of the things that we'll be talking about in the review portion of the video. It is an asymmetric game, meaning that depending upon which faction you are playing, that will determine the type of game you're playing. So we've got two smuggler factions that you can see here. These two factions are essentially going to be playing a pick up and deliver game. And then you've got the Mollusk Union and the Bluefin Squadron, and they are going to both be playing an area control game. You're all playing on the same shared map, which is made up of these region tiles that are going to be placed on the board when you move off the edge of a tile and do what is called exploring. All of this is in the goal of trying to gain fame. When 30 points have been reached by one of the factions, that's going to trigger the end game, and you're going to do end game scoring. Essentially, the way the game is going to play out is that each faction is going to be taking a number of actions on their turn, and they are going to at least place, well, not at least, they're going to always place 2 dice each turn on their player board. Some of these player boards have some restrictions for the type of dice that can be played. So, for example, here the Bluefin Squadron, to take this order action, they would have to place a 3 die there, a 3 pip die there, repair 2, etc. Sometimes it'll be things like odd or even. In this case, the Mollusk Union needs an even die to take the repair action, etc. But you're going to be taking actions, placing dice onto your player board to take those actions. The smugglers, as I said, are going to be trying to do a pick up and deliver. So if you look at this market row here, which is always going to have 3 cards, these are somewhat multi-used cards. The smugglers are going to be paying attention to this bottom portion if they're going to be doing the pick up and deliver. This is saying that if you get these coins, you want to deliver them to a skull island. Every island on the board has a particular type. If you want to think of it as a suit, you can. Here you've got the crossed swords. Here you've got the palm tree. But within this stack, you're going to have all of them represented. So let me find right here, actually on the bottom, is a skull island. Let's say, for example, that this smuggler had gone down and explored here. Now there is a skull island, and if they were to have this card and went to that island, they could deliver it there for fame. All right, so that's going to be one of the primary ways that the smugglers gain fame, is by delivering cargo to the appropriate island. When they do that, in addition to getting fame for themselves, what they're going to do is increase the value of this region, which is this whole tile, that the other 2 factions are going to be fighting over for control. So the Bluefin Squadron here and the Mollusk Union here are going to be using their abilities to gain control of these different islands. So each of their flagships are going to give them points of control, but also other components within their faction is going to give them control, like these little patrol markers, these shark fins, also give +1 to control for their faction, and these comrade tokens give +1 control for the Mollusk Union. And so you can see that you've got this shared board that the smugglers are going to be using their pick up and deliver to gain fame, but also to increase the value of the islands that the other 2 factions are going to be fighting for control over. You can, as I said, also use these cards as crew. So instead of using them for a pick up and deliver, if you hire them as crew, then you're going to get some type of ability here that is denoted in this section of the card. There are also going to be battles, but battles are only ever going to take place if one of the two factions that share a spot have their cannons loaded. So it's not an automatic battle if two pieces share the same spot, only if one of the two have cannons loaded. If you do have a battle and you take some damage, the winning team's going to get some type of boon, but also they're going to cause damage to your ship, and they're going to usually be able to determine which of these things are going to get blocked from you. So now you couldn't take those two actions because your ship has been damaged. You would have to repair. There are other spots on the board that allow you to repair damage, which you can remove those off of your ship and then have access to those abilities again. There is also asymmetry in the fact that while you're playing different types of games, depending upon which faction you are, you also are going to have certain actions that are specific to your faction. All right, so for example, the Mollusk Union has this Inspire, which allows them to place their comrade tokens on different islands. The Bluefin has ways to kind of counteract that by removing comrades with their Bombard action, things along those lines. Also, the Mollusk Union has cards that they have access to. They draw 2 at the beginning of every round. These cards are different things that they can play when they are, they'll tell you on the card when you can play them, and they're going to usually do some type of kind of a sneaky type of a thing. The Bluefin Squadron has 1 extra die, which means that they're going to be taking essentially 1 extra turn each round, because again, every turn you're going to be placing 2 dice. Their last turn they only place 1 die, but it gives them an extra turn each round. Another thing that is specific to each faction is that the smuggling factions, when they deliver that cargo, not only are they going to get fame for delivering that cargo, they're also going to get some bonuses on their boards here, but they also have to pledge where these cargo are going to go. So basically, they are kind of betting or trying to influence which of these islands are going to be controlled by which of the other two factions. So, for example, if the Gray Smuggler here had delivered this cargo, they're going to have to say which of the 2 other factions, which of the Bluefin or the Mollusk factions, are going to be controlling the Skull Islands at the end of the game, because that will give them extra fame at the end of the game as well by choosing who they're going to pledge to. And that is all face down. Only those 2 smugglers are going to know who they've pledged different cargo to. You can, try to get an idea based upon what's happening on the board at any given time, but you don't know for sure until the end of the game when they reveal that. So the Bluefin Squadron and the Mollusk Union, all of their fame is going to be scored during the game, whereas the 2 smuggler factions will end up getting extra fame at the end of the game based upon their pledged cargo. That is essentially Ahoy. I am, of course, leaving a number of things out, a lot of the finer details, but that should give you a general idea on how the game plays. Let's head over and let you know what we think. All right, so that gave you a general idea on how the game plays. I didn't go into a lot of detail because this is one of those types of games that we kind of mentioned during the overview that is what's known as an asymmetric game, meaning that depending upon which of the 4 factions, well, technically 3 factions, which of the 3 factions you're playing, that will determine the type of game you're playing. And so if it's all right, let's just start there. Let's start there.
Okay.
We normally start with components. We'll come back to components, but I want to talk about the asymmetric play. How did that work for you? Did they feel distinct from each other? Do you think it worked having these kind of 3 different types of factions all playing in the same sandbox, or
water box?
Water box, which is what the ocean is also known as, by the way.
The big old water box beyond the horizon. Is what my grandpappy always said. I enjoy asymmetric games. They take a lot of work to kind of get at first, and there's that concern of, am I going to teach this that often? I don't want to spend the entire review comparing this to Root.
No.
Right, and I think that inevitably will happen, but I'll try to kind of reserve that. I think that the asymmetry in here is distinct, especially the warring factions versus the mercantile war profiteering factions. I think those 2 feel even more distinct from each other than in some games like, say, Root. But I don't know if they're necessarily harder to teach, which I'm kind of impressed by. I like how different they feel, but they all kind of resolve around that same dice system, which I liked.
So this surprised me, this asymmetricalness of this, because this it feels like a game that is meant for two different types of gamers, and I automatically get like a big red flag there when I'm like, oh, okay, you're telling me that there's area control and there's resource management, and that you can, if you like one or you like the other, you can still enjoy this game. Like, I had big red flags, but I was really surprised that when I played the resource management or pick up deliver, whatever you want to call it, it's less resource management, but the pick up and deliver aspect of it, like, I genuinely felt like I was playing a different game than when I was playing the area control, and that really surprised me.
Yeah, I would echo that. What's nice about it, and you kind of alluded with it, is that while you are essentially playing somewhat different games, you're still interacting with each other. And the interaction is sometimes direct. Like, if you're the pick up and deliver factions, the smugglers, you can still initiate battles. You can certainly be attacked. But there's sometimes a disincentivization. Wow,
Disincentivization.
That's not a word. Maybe you said the word.
Maybe.
Because they do interact. In other words, the smugglers are going to be determining the value for the particular regions that the two warring factions are fighting over. And so that's a nice little kind of trick that they pulled there. You are all working in the same central area, but you're playing essentially different games. And so, they being Leader Games, they've kind of done this type of thing. That's one of the things they're known for, right? Is this idea of, Root, we mentioned already, you're playing different factions, kind of playing different games within the same game. Oath did something similarly.
Vast kicked it off with that.
It was kind of like the starting of this.
They have a great identity as a company.
Yeah.
You kind of know what you're going into when you play one of their games, which I appreciate. So I wasn't caught off guard. So, well, what do you mean I'm doing something different than you?
Yeah.
You anticipate that going into a game like this.
And you mentioned it earlier, but I want to also kind of highlight that I did not feel that this was tremendously difficult to teach for the type of game that it is. When you hear this description of, this plays slightly differently than this one, that can be challenging to teach. This one I didn't find quite as challenging to teach. I feel like it's maybe the most simple of these asymmetric games in this, at least in this publisher's line. I think it's easier to teach than Vast, easier to teach than Ruth, certainly easier to teach than Oath, but still keeps that asymmetry there.
That was something that really surprised me, is that we sat down and we were learning the game, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to read my little side book and learn all my player stuff. And I don't know, that's usually stressful to me, because I often feel like, oh, I'm reading too slow. I'm not as quick as everybody else, or whatever it is. And so I appreciate that, like, you literally taught me my faction and it was done. There wasn't there wasn't a separate book I had to read. There wasn't this own complicated thing. Like, you taught me, done, I got it.
Yeah.
I may not have understood the intricacies of strategy or anything, but
Make one thing clear. Simple. I still don't understand the intricacies of the strategies. I don't know that I ever will. But they're not obtuse, I don't think. But generally, you understand what you're supposed to be doing. If you're the smugglers, you are trying to get cargo, also get crew to kind of boost yourself up and deliver them in such a way that you are also pledging, which I think is an interesting kind of twist to those smugglers, is that another way that the interaction is boosted up is that not only are you picking up cargo from one island and delivering it to another island, but you are then trying to say which of these two warring factions here are going to have control of those types of islands so that I can get more points. So that was kind of a neat little twist there too.
And when you're playing those factions, as the game draws closer to the end, you, as the smugglers, can affect the board state, especially if you get certain crew that moves, say, other people's pieces. You can swing those majorities one way or the other. One, to kind of anti-king make, right? To kind of say, you don't get those points. Yeah, to balance, that's a good way to put it. But also to kind of swing things in your own favor. Like, well, I said that the Red Islands were going to be controlled by the Shark faction. Let me use this crew that I've got early in the game to kind of make that happen as the game state draws to a close. It's really interesting. This game does a lot of things that I kind of consider red flags.
Yeah.
Like that. Don't touch my stuff. Don't mess with the stuff that I've been doing.
Right.
But this game does it in kind of a fun way. The Mollusk, the yellow player faction, has hidden cards that can drastically change, right? You played them last, so I'm going to use you as the example.
Yeah.
You're holding a few cards. I'm terrified to go into battle against you
Right.
because I hate games that have nope cards.
Right, yeah.
This doesn't quite have nope cards, but they're very interesting cards.
Yeah.
And I know that that can really sway how a round is going to shape up. And even though that those things, area control, and then messing with other people's stuff and shifting things around is often a red flag for me, they really work in this game. And maybe it's because the framework is not too complex.
Right.
Maybe it's because the game is approachable enough for what it is. And I think that the 4 different factions are all fun.
You know, and
Interesting.
I didn't know if you were going to bring up a point. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I almost never want to play the fight for majority. Like I'm okay with area majority, but I don't ever want to have to fight for it, and I definitely don't want to have to roll dice to fight for it. And so that aspect of this really, it just was exactly what I thought it was going to be. So
You didn't like it.
I didn't. So the cards, the mollusk, the hidden cards of like,
Yeah.
oh, you can throw this out, and suddenly like you have like 5 more power that I didn't think you had before we went into this conflict. I didn't like that. That's
Sure.
not my jam at all. But I could see that it could be interesting if that was your thing.
If that's kind of the style of gameplay you like. Yeah,
But
that's
also,
true.
I didn't have to play that
Right.
if I play the smuggler. Like I could occasionally go into battle, and that stuff still happens, but it's not the meat and bones of what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of not bounce off of, but kind of add to something you had mentioned earlier, which is this idea of you don't typically like those types of games. I don't typically like those types of games either, where you can play a card that just kind of changes things up a little bit. I think that it helps in this game to have the theme of piracy, as silly as that sounds. It does feel, it's not like you're building up a building and then someone's just kind of destroying it. I don't like that. As odd as it sounds, the thematic framework of this helps me get into this mindset of, don't get too precious about what you've got there on the board, because it's likely going to get affected. This game is all about interaction. You do have to know that going in. There's going to be a lot of interaction. Some of it's going to be negative, but there's also positive interaction as well. You can make little kind of non-binding deals with the usually not going to be the 2 warfaring groups. Usually going to be one of the fighty groups and the smugglers try to have an uneasy alliance for a round or two to kind of get,
I'll move my pieces out of the way. You deliver to this nice island that I have the majority of.
Right.
Yeah.
Please boost that victory point engine for me.
Exactly.
I really liked that. Yeah, I as much negative interaction as there is in the game, there are also a lot of positive points of interaction, which I find really, really clever. And man, it's just fun to see the island or the island chain take shape.
Yeah.
The board starts very small, and as you explore, you have a lot of free reign on how you want to design
place
the
things.
board.
Right, yeah.
And so from game to game, that can be vastly different. You could really make it inconvenient to travel around and have to use more of that warping kind of action.
Yeah, the tailwind.
The tailwind. And if you attack someone and you keep blocking up their tailwinds with those damage, you're really hampering them based on the board state.
Sure.
There's a lot of really good design points going into this.
I really appreciate that tailwind mechanism because it lets you warp anywhere, but it never lets you go directly to an island.
Right.
And so it takes 2 dice no matter what you do if you want to get to an island. But you can get to almost any island you want to.
Yeah,
As long as you
usually that's
spend
true.
that whole turn. And so I like that.
Yeah, that is true. Now, we're going in a little bit reverse order here because normally we start off with components and then get into gameplay, but just because of the way the conversation was going, I went in opposite order. So let's talk a little bit about the components in the game. I mentioned that one of the things that this publisher is known for are these asymmetric games, the 4-letter titles. Another thing that Kyle Farron's artwork is another thing that is a huge draw for many people, and myself included. I'm a huge fan of the aesthetic that are created within leader games, and I love it here as well. The art, I think, for me, is fantastic across the board. The components, I think, are very good for what, you have the island tile, not island tiles, the region tiles that are double layered so that you can put in the little value die in there.
Won't jostle around and tip over.
Right.
The little touches that are great.
Really good. I like the wooden components. What are your thoughts on the art and components?
I think Pirate Snells is cute and weird.
Yeah.
Like it's a strange animal to pick.
I I know that this is my own biases sneaking in, but if this was typical Merchant and Marauders style of pirate kind of artwork and stuff, I would be a little less interested.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it would be a little bit less inviting or enticing. I don't know why, but there is something about the Magic formula of this artwork, those really nice little wooden pieces that are minimalistic but clear and very functional instead of minis that all kind of mush the board, the aesthetic of the board around. I think that what they have going is really good. I'm glad they're still leaning into the same aesthetic because I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
I don't think it's as cute as Root.
That's a pretty high bar.
It really is a high bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that cute, but it's clever. It's quaint.
Do you want to go ahead and start us off on our final thoughts?
Sure. So this going in, especially because my very first play was when we did our live thing, and I played 100% the faction that I would never choose, the ultimate all I do is fight faction. So I came into it with a feeling of I never want to play this again. But I went ahead and I tried the other faction, the pick up and deliver, and it was a completely different game. And I really appreciated that. And we also played it at 4, so I think that I have some caveats here. So I'm going to give it a 6.5. It's still not a game that I'm going to recommend and I'm going to pull out and I'm going to play, but I'm highly surprised by what happened and what I felt. I do feel like it should always be played at 4, because for my sake, if you played at 2, you have to only do battles and fighting, and that I wouldn't like. At 3, I felt like the people that were fighting over too few areas because not enough things were being bumped up because there was only one person increasing areas. But at 4, I felt like it was that perfect balance. So I feel like this game is a good game and I would only recommend it for 4 players. And when you have the weird situation where you have 2 people that really love conflict and 2 people that really love pick up and deliver. So I think that it fits a very specific niche, but I think it did that niche surprisingly well.
That's a really good point. Numerically, I'm giving this game an 8. It's so hard to put a number to something like this. And I know that one of the sentiments out there is that we don't play games enough times.
Right.
There's a lot of times that, we play a game a few times before we review. We play it, as Tom puts it, enough times. And that enough number is different. And many people will absolutely disagree with it. I almost, in a way, feel unqualified to review this game. I would love to do this review in 3 years after I've gotten to play this time and time again and with different groups of people and everything.
You know each faction intimately.
Yeah.
That would be great. You would have a top-notch quality review 3 years too late. And so what we do is we play games to the point where we know it well enough to say, I like this. I'm going to come back to this. This is a game that I wouldn't mind teaching people. That's an 8 for me. It's really fun. And you get a review now instead of in 3 years. Right. I'm really impressed with what they do. I like the idea of playing the different factions because I'm not always into smashing and fighting and rolling dice for combat. But those factions are fun. They even feel distinct from each other.
They do.
One has cards, the other has the extra dice, and the extra units behave in different ways. I love that. Or I could just run around and smuggle. Very neat. And depending on the group, I could see it being like, hey, I'll be the smugglers this time.
Right.
That's awesome. I do want to come back to this. I could see the score maybe going up in the future. Check back with me in 3 years. It's an 8 for now.
All right. I'm going to come right at an 8 as well, Chris. I think that while the game comes very, very close, dangerously close to being excellent for me, and it may rise, as you mentioned, this is a game that I think will reward repeated plays. I do agree with you, Wendy, that I think that there are some limitations to the game that are going to keep it from getting to excellent at this point, which is that I think player count is huge. I honestly don't have an interest in playing this at 2 players. I think that really the magic of this game is in the interactions of those kind of competing but not competing,
almost neutral players.
I really feel like it needs that to shine, and so that is something that bumps it down a little bit for me. And I do agree that you probably want to make sure that people know going into the game what type of game it is and is this going to be something that you have any, interest in? Because it's not a wide appeal game, I don't think. There are going to be some people, I think, that are going to bounce off this very hard. But that's something that happens with asymmetric games. You know what I mean? That's just part of the nature of the beast, I suppose. But for me, I think it does some very clever things. I think that what it's attempting to do, which is very ambitious, is pulled off quite well. So I'm coming in with an 8. All right, well, that is Ahoy. Until next time, I'm Mike DiLisio.
I'm Wendy Yi.
I'm Chris Yi.
Have fun sailing the seas of...
Water boxes.
I was going to say cheese, but that's okay.
The seas of cheese.